Hey guys, welcome back. Right behind my fat bod is the Z1-R engine. I'm going to go over it in this video. There are a couple of issues that I need to take care of, one in particular, but I'll show you what I'm talking about here right now. All right, the first thing I want to do is preface this video by saying that I'm not going to call out anyone like the engine builder and say, you know, this person or this business sucks or anything like that. That's not what this is all about. I will go over the issues that I see, one in which, like I explained just now in the quick intro, that I need to correct before this goes back in the frame. I'm pointing at an empty lift, I don't know why. So once we get this issue done, which will be addressed in this video, then we'll get it back in the frame, probably in a separate video, and show you a little bit of that and so forth. So again, I'm not here to bash anybody. I'm not going to call out the name of the engine builder. I'm not going to tell you how much my customer paid for the work. I'm not going to go into any of that stuff. I'm going to go into essentially the Jack Webb school of video production and just give you the facts. All right, so I just wanted to preface the video and explain that really quick. Okay folks, so here is the Z1-R engine, which is back from the engine builder. Now you might ask yourselves or ask me why I didn't build it, and I would have done that, but my customer wanted to do somewhat of a more custom build in regards to the cams and all that stuff, and I don't do any of that stuff. This particular builder specializes in these Kawasaki liter bike engines, 1000cc engines, and so I think it's a good idea to have somebody like that do it when you want to do that kind of work. You know, the machining stuff, I'd be all over that. You know, if I had actually all the equipment that a engine building shop would have, you know, any boring equipment, honing, and so forth. Certainly I understand the tolerances and, you know, the machining, like I said, side of it as far as removing metal, sizing parts to an accurate tolerance and things like that. But I don't do, you know, cam degreeing like this engine is, and I'm not going to go into the details of what it's set up for because it really doesn't matter, all right? It has somewhat of a mild build as far as the cams go. I don't know what the compression ratio is, but I do need to find that out from the engine builder because it may play a role in carb tuning, or it will play a role, I should say, in carb tuning in the future. But that's down the road. So I'm going to walk around the motor with you here and show you what it looks like. Obviously you can see pretty well and what we have to deal with. There's one issue that I got to be honest with you, I'm kind of disappointed in that I have to deal with, but it's not, you know, life altering or anything. So here's the intake side. You know, this guy does a nice job, okay? I'm not going to say he doesn't. The engines look good. I have set one other one up for my customer from this engine builder. You know, it did have some problems and needed to go back to the engine builder for, but that's another deal. And like I said, I'm not here to bash the business or the individual or anything like that. And it was taken care of. Okay, so it was taken care of. This particular engine builder, in my opinion, is difficult to work with in some ways because the guy does not publish a phone number. He does everything through email, and I find that to be a little bit questionable, would be the word that I would use, because I like to talk to people and say, hey, what do you mean by this, and what's the tolerances on this, and how did you do this, and so forth. And that's well, I should say that's somewhat difficult, not hardly difficult, but somewhat difficult to do when you can't get on a phone with somebody. But overall, I would say that this is a very well built engine by a very competent KZ1000 engine builder. But we do have a problem. Now, again, I am very disappointed in this, and it's right here. This is the original shifter shaft that was supplied with the parts that when I tore this motor down. Now, my customer, we'll get back to this here in a second. My customer wanted me to take it apart, and I don't really know why. He said, you take it apart, and I said, well, you want me to rebuild it in a stock? And he hadn't decided. Then he just said, no, we're going to send it out. So, you know, the customer's always right. I did what the customer wanted me to do. And that was the earlier videos where two of the bolts broke. One of them was for the starter hold down, and I brought it to a machine shop and had everything corrected as far as that goes. All right. But anyway, So I tore it down and I organized everything as accurately and as organized as I possibly could. Bagged everything up, and everything was in those little plastic shoebox sized plastic boxes with the snap lids, you know, and it went out to an engine builder. It actually went out to one before this, but the guy didn't do anything with it for months and months and months, and I don't remember the name of the guy, and I'm not going to call him out either, or her. I don't know, male or female, whatever, but the bottom line is it didn't get done. It went to the engine builder again that my customer had another KZ1000 engine done, I don't know, 2 years ago or so. So anyway, that's that. Now, back to this. I find this unacceptable. To put an engine back together, especially a high dollar engine rebuild service, and to use a used part that is unusable. And what I mean by unusable is we cannot get the shifter lever over this spline. Now, I documented this when I took the motor apart. In fact, I have a thumb drive that has about 50 pictures on it for reference purposes when I tore it apart. And I documented that this was messed up. My assumption was that anybody who was going to build this would source a replacement and use that replacement. That did not happen. I don't know why, but my customer did reach out to the builder a number of days ago, because I've only had this here about 3 or 4 days, and essentially asked what the heck was going on with that. The engine builder simply replied that he doesn't have any of these shifter shafts and doesn't know where to get a new one. Now, I don't know what he means by new, like new brand new, or new as in a good replacement. Well, folks, it took me about 5 minutes on eBay to find a good replacement. Now, I haven't got it yet, but from their photos, there was a gentleman, or I assume a gentleman on eBay, selling 16 of them, and he had 2 of them left. And obviously, breaking these engines down over time, he has a stock of them. So I got one coming. It should be here tomorrow. That's when we'll pick the video up again to do this work. And that work is, we're going to need to pull the, this sprocket cover off, and we're going to need to get into the engine cover. It's called a transmission cover. It's right there. We're going to pull the sprocket cover, the engine, or the transmission cover off. You can replace this shaft in an operation that is, if it was in the frame, it's in the service manual, is what you can do with it in the frame. So it's not like a real in-depth repair that you'd have to split the case for or anything like that. This shifter shaft lives specifically inside this transmission cover, and it has the 2 pawls on it that will rock back and forth when this is actuated to push the pins on the shifter drum forward or clockwise or counterclockwise, depending on what gear or where you're selecting it, So that's what we're going to do in this video. Yeah, again, I really find this unacceptable. In any situation, if I was just doing a repair for somebody, let's say, a sprocket was bad, and I was changing out a sprocket, or something in, the clutch actuation over here, or something like that, or anything like that. I would absolutely say, hey, I'm going to source one of those and repair it, okay? But, that didn't happen. And I do not quite understand why that wouldn't happen, but it did. Yeah, so again, I consider this very poor practice, and I would never, ever have a job leave my shop with a part that simply won't work unless it was something really, really exotic and it's impossible to source, and the customer said, just throw it back in, we'll make it work. And then I'd have them sign a release on that, you know what I'm saying? But, I really find that to be just crappy, work, and even crappier customer service, to be honest with you. But, so, again, I'm not going to say who this is, and I'm not going to call out the builder. I'm not going to call out anybody. I'm just showing you the facts. I'm showing you what we found and my subjective opinion on something like this, and I guess we'll leave it at that. Let's take a look at the rest of the motor. He does a really nice job on a lot of the details. Some of the details aren't so good. I think he uses too much of this gray goo. It oozes out around places. I'd have to look at the service manual. I'm pretty sure the mothership tells you to use some sort of a sealant around the around these end studs here, because this is your main oil where it comes up, because there's a pathway here. This right here is your main oil gallery right here that runs across, right there, runs right across. And so it pushes oil up under pressure into the top end via that one. I don't really remember if the front ones do it or not. I got to be honest with you, I don't remember. But I know the back ones do. And so I'm pretty sure the mothership says to put some goo on these, but there's a lot of goo here, okay? And I know for a fact they don't say you need to use goo, gasket goo that is, on these case cover gaskets. You only use them at the seam of where the top half and the bottom half of the engine go together. That would be the same here too. You can see there's a bunch in there too. We're going to have to get that out of there. So I don't like that. It's unnecessary, and I don't think it looks very professional. This side over here is a little bit more visible. You can see that level of goo that's around there, and it looks like Honda Bond or something like that, but I'm not sure. At least you could use something black, but yeah. So I don't like that. It's unnecessary. I follow the service manual exactly, and I think you know that. When I do a service, here's some right here. When I do a service manual, when I do a service manual, when I do a repair, I look at the service manual to see what it tells me about where to put gasket sealer on reassembly, okay? And that's what I do. There might be some exceptions if the case surface is messed up from somebody else, but otherwise I follow the service manual. I don't believe you need to put all this crap. Obviously you do here. I mean, this is where the two case halves meet, and you definitely need to use something. I like to use 3-bond on these myself. This might be 3-bond. I don't know, a gray one. I don't know what he uses, but anyway. So overall, it's not bad. I mean, the proof will be in the pudding, I guess, as this phrase goes, when we get it running, which won't be for a while, but we'll get it going, and we'll make sure we have that on video. And, oh, by the way, in case anybody asks, and somebody did just recently, put a question up on an earlier Z1-R when I was disassembling the motor, this engine holder here, this setup. This engine builder makes these and then supplies them at a cost when a customer picks up a motor. This is the actual original one that came with the previous KZ1000 engine that this builder did. I believe I still had it, and I made sure the customer brought it up to him on this build. That way he wouldn't get charged for another one, because it works pretty well. I mean, I guess you could scrutinize some of the welds on it and so forth, but it seems to hold up pretty well, and I'm not going to really worry about it too much. Yeah, because it's had, a KZ1000 engine in it 3 times, technically. It had the previous build in it twice, because it had to come back out and then, like I said, go back to the builder for a problem. And then this one. So it's held up so far. I guess it will continue to do so. Yeah. So, he does a nice job. He puts the stainless cap bolts in. It looks good. I mean, he does some high temperature paint, some sort of paint that's really hard, and lasts, and it looks good. Puts on polished covers. I don't know if he polishes himself or not. I have no idea. And so overall, it's a nice job. Luckily, this spline is okay. Otherwise, we could deal with that the same way by replacing it. But again, this is hard to digest and accept. In fact, I'm not going to accept it. I mean, this is just really, really bad. Super bad practice. And we will get it fixed. As soon as the replacement shaft comes in, I'll fire the video back up. We'll kind of position ourselves in the shop here a little bit better light-wise, and then we'll start digging into this, and we'll replace that shaft, protect this seal, put a little Scotch tape around the spline, something thin, so when you pull it back off, it doesn't mar it. The damage already may have been done. I hope not, but this is pretty sharp edge now because it's all gnarled up. And then we'll reverse that when we put the replacement shaft in and shove that cover back on. All right. So we'll pick it up when I get the shaft, and we're going to do that work. Okay, folks, we got ourselves a shifter shaft. It came in a day early via the United States Postal Service, which is excellent. Thank you to the USPS. The spline is in really good shape. Overall, the shaft looks pretty good. And I got to be honest with you, Kawasaki didn't do the greatest job in this weld here, but it's not, it's not like it's breaking or anything. And clearly it was working in some bike for quite some time, so we're going to leave it. I don't have a mechanism or a way to repair that anyway. You'd have to chuck it in a lathe and get in there with a tool and cut some of that out and re-weld it like TIG it. I don't have, number one, the swing in my lathe to do it, and number two, a TIG. So we're going to leave it, like I said. I'm not going to overcomplicate things because, when do I ever do that? So yeah, we'll clean it up a little bit more just before I put it in because there's a little bit of surface rust here. Let's go ahead and get this assembly done. As you know, I always follow the service manual, unless it's something I've done 40 times before. So really all Kawasaki says is to take this cover off. Usually on these KZs you can get away with loosening the starter cover here because this overlaps this little lip here. But otherwise, you can just take it off. I think we'll just get it out of the way completely. So anyway, we'll just get the cover out of the way. There's usually a gasket in here that is almost always bad. Except when it's brand new like this, which is nice. He's got a little silicone in here. That's great actually, because these things want to move. This isn't really the greatest design as far as, sealing off this cover, to be honest with you. But I guess it's just to keep the shmoo at a minimum. Now we can take the sprocket cover off. We don't have to worry about the clutch stuff here because number one, the service manual says you don't even have to disconnect the clutch if the engine was in the frame. And number two, the engine's not in the frame. There it goes. What's actually hanging up on is that shifter shaft, which is okay because there's a new seal in there. Yeah, seal looks just fine. Here's your seal. No problemo. Alright. Lay this aside where it's not going to get damaged. Next step in the service manual is to disconnect the neutral wire here, obviously. That's got to get out of the way. This is your neutral switch, I should say. Now naturally it says to remove the engine sprocket, but we don't have a sprocket on here. We have a sprocket nut and a washer. So we will lay those aside. Alright, so you have these Phillips heads like the stock one, the standard OEM one has, of course, and that is going to be maybe a challenge. So I'm just going to go ahead and get my little impact. If you look at the CB175 video, and then just buzz these out. Now remember, he used a crap load of shmoo on this, and so we're going to have to deal with that, unfortunately. But we'll get these screws out first, and then we'll deal with the shmoo. Things I do for, yeah, there we go. Look at that. Okay, this is not good. That's loose. That's not. So this one was loose. That's not good. I'm not going to say anything, except it was loose. Yeah, that one was loose. Gee whiz. This one was not tightened. There's no question that somebody forgot to tighten this one. Now that could have been real bad. When we start going down the road in this thing, this screw, this panhead screw falls out and gets jammed up in that chain or gets jammed up in here. Probably most likely would get thrown out, but you never know. And then what happens? So that's not good, which leads me to believe that I'm going to have to go over all the exposed fasteners on this engine and make sure that they're tight, which is unfortunate considering it just came back from an engine builder who I said is skilled and competent, and I still believe that to be the fact. I'm not saying that that's not the fact, but people make mistakes. I do it all the time. But that's a pretty critical mistake to make when you leave a loose fastener near something that spins. Oh boy, that's not tight at all. What the hell? That one's not bad. That one's not bad. That sounds about right. That sounds about right. So there's two of them there. Three of them. Four of them. Lordy mercy. Oh wow. Yeah, that one's not too bad. It's a little rough getting out here. It must be some goo that got in the threads, I hope. Yeah, I can see it. There's just some shmoo, some gasket shmoo. That's okay. Oh boy. Folks, I don't know. Now, as usual, you have different lengths here, but it's pretty hard to screw these up. You just don't want to go and put a long one in where a short one's supposed to go, because you'll potentially drive that screw or bolt or whatever into through an engine, you know, part of the engine case, especially if it's thin and inside the engine. So you just got to really pay attention to that. Oh, lordy, lordy. All right. This guy can come out because it's just a clutch push rod that goes through the, you know, the shaft. So you can just put it right back in that way, and it's going to be in the same spot, you know. That's the, again, that's clutch push rod. Goes through the, I don't know what they call it, the primary or counter shaft on this engine. I'm not really sure. But, yeah, it just goes through that. We'll put it back in later. That would be bad if we forgot that. I almost forgot this guy, which is a 10, and it's not tight either. Keep that in mind if you have some different ones like that. Okay, let's see if we can tap it off. All right, stand by. This is why I hate this glue. I got the bottom moved. I'm just going to move the top again, and we can just kind of wiggle it off, because you pry on this too hard, you'll snap the aluminum. I'm telling you right now. I've never done it, but especially if it's aluminum from the, you know, Jurassic period. I got to find some new jokes. There we go. All right, we're getting there now. Now, obviously, the part I'm omitting is putting a pan or draining the oil or anything, because there's none in it. So just keep that in mind if you're doing this job on an engine. Still hung up on the down low. I don't know why you use it unless I gotta look at the service manual, but I'm pretty sure they don't say to do this. All right, I gotta work on this some more. I'll come back. All right, good deal. All right, gently pull it over that tape. Don't want to mess up this, you know, seal. That seal right there, right? I'm gonna double check and make sure we got the right gasket, which we do. It's always a good thing. OEM, baby. Now it says don't take this shaft out. We're not going to take that shaft out, because this is the shaft that the shifter forks live on. You pull that shaft out and the shifter forks drop down in the transmission. So that wouldn't be very good. I wouldn't like that. In fact, I wouldn't like that at all. So really all we got to do is just spread these guys out, and then carefully slide the shifter shaft off. And then we can put the new one in. So we'll take it off, then we'll clean the gasket up, protecting all this stuff. It says take this off too, this sleeve for the sprocket. What is that called? Yeah, and there's an O-ring behind here, but you don't really need to pull it off for this purpose. Now, let me explain what this O-ring does here. What this O-ring does is seal the end of this sleeve off. Okay, the spacer sleeve, which ain't in the greatest shape either, to be honest with you. Anyway, it seals the spacer sleeve off, so oil's not going to necessarily come through the shaft. Now, oil's going to obviously come out here, but there's a seal on the shaft, so it doesn't really matter if it comes out here, but it does matter if it tries to come up the center of the shaft. So the theory behind it is to put an O-ring behind here, which kind of seals this off so it can't migrate up the shaft, come out the splines, and then come to the outside of the motor via that route. So that's what that's for, and a lot of bikes have little O-rings behind them. Suzuki's, you know, the whole bit, all right? So just keep that in mind. We don't need to take that off from here. But like I said, this spacer is not that good. Oof. I might actually try to source one of these before we put this back together, because this one is grooved terribly. I don't want it to ruin the seal, so I'll take a look at that later. But that can be put in afterwards. You can take that out, I'm pretty sure, because of course the seal rides on it. I'll double check that though, but I'm pretty sure you can do that. I'm not 100% sure though, like I said, but we may have to leave this open while I source something like that. I don't know. So anyway, we'll get this guy out, which is just pulling not the cogs, the what are these things called? The doodads. And then we'll just slide the shaft out on top of this. This is the spring that does the detent to go back and forth, the spring right in the middle here. The other shaft does not have that, so we're going to reuse that, of course, on this one. It just slips over and then goes between there. No biggie. So we pull that off, and we can put it on the other shaft. You said shaft. Leave that alone. So this is a pretty easy job, you know, as far as that replacement goes. But yeah, it sucks. If I had known that, I would have gotten one of these. This is not terribly good. Sure I don't have one either. All right, well, let's continue with the job at hand. We'll just get this cleaned up, get it ready to go back together. All right, folks, I got the fan on. I hope it doesn't screw up our audio. We're all cleaned up, ready to go. Obviously, I don't have the arm back in. I wanted to mention a couple quick things as tips that I have found to help when you're changing out internals and removing, cleaning, and putting back on cover gaskets, engine cover gaskets, and engine covers. The first thing that I should have mentioned before is you take a little straw like from your spray bottle, and you want to basically feel inside these holes here to see if there's any that go inside the crankcase. And the reason why is when you clean this thing, you're going to get a little bit of debris inside those holes. You're going to want to blow those out. You don't want to blow them inside the block. So none of these go there. This one does, but it's capped off, or I should say covered off by the actual cover itself. It's a dead end. This goes straight through, so you may have seen other clips. I had a little piece of wadded up paper towel in there, and I protected this real well as far as the output shaft and the splines. And the bearing from Shmoo to get on it and in it. All right, so that's one thing. The other thing is to help loosen up some of these gaskets, and especially in this situation where you have fairly new gasket goo, if you take some carb clean and a brush and just carefully brush it on, it helps soften that up, and then you can more easily get it off. Now, getting it off, I'm not going to tell you exactly the way to do that because there's 100 million ways to do it. Start with the least aggressive way, and you have to move up as the situation necessitates. If you're going to use like a fine sandpaper, I usually do, and I did on this one, to clean this up, you definitely want to use a block, something more like a precision block type thing with your sandpaper, so you don't round these edges over. All I did was use a V-block like this out of my machinist box, and just put the sandpaper on. I have another piece for that, but I can't find it right now. I don't know where it went. So just use something nice and flat. I know there will be people that'll say you never sand these, you never do this, you never do that. I do it all the time, and I don't have any leaks, and I've done it many times. So then I cleaned out all the threads and ready to go. Now let's see. I think that was it. Let's talk about this sleeve here. I think the sleeve, I'm not sure if it was already put in that way. You see, you do have another line here. You can't even feel it with your nail or anything. So I think it can go on this way, and then this part won't be involved in that. Obviously, this is the worn spot from before. This seal, the lip of the seal, sits to one side of the center. So all we have to do is flip it around, and I think we'll be okay. There's a little lip on this. I'm going to put this in the lathe and clean this up, just this edge. Not with a cutter, but just with some sandpaper or a file. It looks like it's kind of pushed out a little bit. Who knows? It's supposed to bump directly up against the bearing, the inner race of the bearing. And each side has a chamfer, so it'll accommodate that O-ring. So since we have to turn it around this way, all right, I'm going to make sure that this is cleaned up in there. According to the service data, you can put this in afterwards like I suspected, so we're going to do that. I think I covered what I needed to cover, so we're ready to throw a little oil on a couple things. We'll put that shaft back in. You said shaft, and then we'll get this thing buttoned back up. Okay, I got the spring on. Got a little Earl in there. Now you got to kind of do about 8 things at once here. You got to get the spring around the boss in there. There we go. Drop that down. That comes out. Got it kind of going at the same time. Spread it out. There we go. And there it is. Well, I don't know about you folks, but I am not gooing this entire thing up again. I'm going to do it my way. Now the service data doesn't give you, the service manual doesn't give you any guidance except to put some grease on here to keep the gasket in place. But your dowel pins, actually I should cover that. There's 2 dowel pins for the main cover and these outer dowel pins are for the outer sprocket cover. It's easier to take, to clean, to take these out. There's a couple of them were real hard, actually both of them were really hard to get out. So I just used my Motion Pro dowel pin puller. You don't want to put pliers or anything on these. And I was able to get them out because the reason why they were tight is whoever put them in didn't clean them real well. I put them on a screwdriver and shoved them on the on the wire wheel and got them nice and clean and tapped them back in. So there's a seam split right here and there's a seam split right there. So that's all we're going to do. We're going to do a little right there of Kawa bond. Right about right there. That seam split, and we're going to do some Kawa bond on this Kawa. What did I say? Kawa bond right there. That's all I ever do on these is just the seams, just the tip, and just for a second. All right, so that'll seal that off just fine as far as the seams go. That's all I do. Unless the service manual says use goo on the entire thing, I don't use goo on the entire thing. So now we'll just line it up on the pins and she's ready to go. I know there's a lot of varying opinions on this, but I do not see the need for putting gasket sealer on a gasket. Gasket sealer or gasket maker is for when you have like this, when you have 2 metal or 2 flat surfaces coming together that need to be sealed off. That's what that's for. The gasket is for it in this situation. And we only treat the little bit of the areas that have a potential, possibility being the seams. That's how I always did it, and that's how I'm doing it now. All right, so I guess we're ready to go. Let me put a little grease on this shaft. Oh, that's strangely satisfying. That way the seal will pick it up as it goes in, lubricate that lip. I got some tape on the spine. There we go. And then we got the O-ring in there. I never took it off, so we're good there. Now I'll put the fasteners back in. That feels good. You're going to know it if you got it in the wrong spot, because it'll get almost in and start to feel mushy. But if it feels solid, like it's bottoming, I mean not bottoming, but the pan head is bottoming, then you know you're right. So that's why I always put them in by hand first, just to make sure. I mean, you can measure the depth of the hole by that little straw method if you want. Make sure that you're not shoving something in. Shove it. That's too long. But we're doing pretty good here. Feels good. Mothership, I did that, by the way. I cleaned up that face. The mothership wants a little bit of grease around that lip, and I think we'll be good. Yeah, so that's fine. It's going to be, remember that lip is inboard quite a bit. That's going to be on that spot, not that really rough spot, so I think we're going to be fine there. Now, how I torque these up is a little different. I go as maximum I can, because they're screws, with my JIS screwdriver, and then I just give it a burp with the power one, and it's usually good enough, because I don't know any other way to torque these with a measured torque. device, like a torque wrench. I mean, I don't really know how I can get a purchase on it to do that. This is how I do it, and it worked out pretty well for me in the past. Good. It's an M6, but it's a screw, a machine screw. M6 bolts like this would normally go about 6 foot-pounds max. And so I don't want to, I can kind of judge it, but these are nice and tight now. If you go any more and you risk stripping them. I mean, you have to go a lot more, but the threads are nice in there. I could feel it the way the threads are going in, that they're okay. You know, I can't leave that way. That's horrible. Hang on. A little better. Maybe I'll get a new one. I use a Scotch-Brite wheel on my second wire wheel setup. You know, the bench grinder setup. If you're going to do that, don't go ninja on it, because you want to leave as much of that zinc oxide or whatever, the material on the outside as possible. Otherwise, this thing will rust faster than a 65 Galaxy at the bottom of the ocean. Yeah, I'm good with that. Now we're going to go ahead and test it, make sure everything works all right. Just, you know, work the shifter back and forth a little bit. All right. All right, now we're in first. Now we're in neutral. First. Neutral. All right, I'm liking it. I'm good with that. I mean, you can't really screw it up. It goes in only one way, but I wanted to verify. Damn, I like that. Okay, guys, that's it on this job. Obviously disappointing as far as the shaft goes. Equally and additionally as disappointing is what we found during the repair of those loose machine screws, those JIS headed panhead screws that hold that cover in. That's unacceptable. I'm sorry. So that means I'm going to have to go over all the hardware and double check everything. The exception will be, you know, the fasteners, that is. The exception will be the head bolts, because there's instructions from this engine builder as to when to retorque these after you get it running after a certain amount of time. So we'll do those at that time, but the rest of them we have to do before the engine goes back in. Yeah, it's just the way it is. Correcting other people's work and mistakes. It's the story of my life, right? A couple quick things as well. Those brushes that I use, I get at a grocery store. You know, local grocery store. You get them in the stationery aisle. I think down here they're for parents that are on vacation with their bratty kids, and they throw the they throw the brushes at them and say, here, go color something and shut up. But I like those for general purpose around the shop here. They work really well. The other thing is I got a new mic, and I hope that the audio is better in these videos from now on, because the other mic was definitely becoming muffled, and that's no good. Final thing I want to mention is, you know, as far as content creators go on YouTube, we kind of follow each other and do a lot of the same things and kind of, you know, emulate each other. And so with that kind of relationship, there's almost a personal connection. And I find that to be the case with guys and women as well that are in the same genre or discipline that I am in, you know, machining and engine building and motorcycle repairs, things like that, like Adam Booth and Mr. Pete and those guys, you know, Winky's Workshop, guys that I met out at the Flywheelers in February. So you kind of, you know, you kind of almost get close to people, even in kind of a distant or remote situation, watching them on YouTube, but they're fellow creators. And I'd like to mention one that I'd like you to give your shout out and prayers to is Steve Wallace. That's the name of his channel. He does videos called Camping with Steve. He just passed the 1 million subscriber mark a week or two ago. And he put up a video a couple of days ago where his wife had passed suddenly. They went to bed one night, and I forgot what night it was, and when they woke up in the morning, he was the only one that woke up. So look up Steve Wallace and you know, put a message in there, say that you're thinking about him, and that's really something that we all would not want to happen to us, of course. And we feel for him, especially as fellow creators out there, knowing that you put a lot of time and effort, and your spouse is very supportful of when you're into it, especially as deep as he was and as thorough. And you know, with that many subscribers, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that gets done that she helped him with. So think about him in your thoughts and prayers, and let's close this video out by saying don't just repair, restore. Thanks for watching. Catch you on the next video.